At the family meeting, my father pointed straight at me and said, "She'll pay for everything." No one flinched. No one looked at me. I stood up and walked out without saying a single word. 6 months later, they watched me on stage receiving a civic award from the mayor. And the look on their faces, I'll remember that for the rest of my life. It wasn't always like this. At least I used to tell myself that. Growing up in Lexington, Massachusetts, in a neat little brick colonial with blue shutters and a picket fence, we looked like a postcard family. Margaret and Robert Thompson. My parents were the kind of people who waved at neighbors and grilled hot dogs every 4th of July. Amanda and I had matching Easter dresses. There was a golden retriever named Sunny who chased sticks in the yard, and on the surface, we were the ideal American family. But beneath the surface was a current I couldn't name as a child. A current that always pulled me a little downstream from where the warmth lived. I was the firstborn, the practice child. Rules were gospel with me. Bedtime at 8:30 sharp. If I wanted a B+ to count as good, I better have a detailed reason why it wasn't an A. Chores were a given and praise was rare. Do your job and maybe you'll get a nod. That was love, I thought. Then Amanda was born 5 years later, and everything shifted. Her tantrums were seen as sensitive temperament. Her grades, even when they were C's, were praised as a good effort. When I was 16, I asked for $85 to register for the SATs. Dad folded his newspaper, looked at me over his glasses and said, "You'll appreciate it more if you earn it yourself." I babysat for 2 weeks to scrape it together. That same month, Amanda got a brand new bike just because even though her old one sat untouched in the garage, the chain wasn't even rusted. I told myself it wasn't favoritism, it was parenting, adjusted by experience. Maybe they'd learned to relax. Maybe I was just more independent. But as the years passed, the pattern deepened. In college, I lived with 4 roommates in a basement unit that smelled like burnt ramen and damp socks. I worked at a diner to cover textbooks and took out modest loans when scholarships fell short. Meanwhile, Amanda's college journey was a merry-go-round of handouts and redirection. First came Temple University, fully paid for by my parents, along with a new MacBook and a $600 a month allowance. She dropped out after 3 semesters. Then came Boston University, another shot, another withdrawal. Every failure was treated like bad luck. I, on the other hand, kept my head down and built a life brick by brick. My first job as a marketing assistant paid peanuts, but I stayed late, volunteered for everything, and climbed. From junior coordinator to specialist to manager, 8 years of effort, and I made it. No family connections, just grit. Still, every time I called home with good news, I got a half-hearted "that's nice, dear," followed by a 10-minute update on Amanda's latest career whim or her emotional struggles. At Thanksgiving, she once arrived crying about a breakup, and when I said I'd been promoted, Mom just nodded and passed the stuffing. I started to keep things to myself, not because I didn't want them to be proud, but because I knew it wouldn't land. By the time I turned 32, I had saved nearly $65,000 toward a condo down payment. My Honda Civic was paid off. I maxed out my 401k. I lived in a small Somerville apartment with secondhand furniture and an old poster of Florence on the wall, a dream vacation I hadn't yet taken. I wasn't flashy. I wasn't extravagant. But I was stable. I had built my own peace. Then last February, I got promoted to senior marketing manager, a 6-figure salary, a team of 5 reporting to me. It was the culmination of years of persistence. I celebrated quietly takeout pad thai with Rachel, my best friend, and a cheap bottle of wine we pretended was expensive. I didn't even tell my parents, not because I wanted to hide it, but because I didn't want them to turn it into something else. Something about Amanda, something that made it feel less like mine. But news travels. A cousin who worked at a partner company heard and called her mom, who called mine. 3 days later, my phone lit up with a call from my mother, bubbling with what I now know was feigned enthusiasm. She asked a lot of questions about the promotion, what it entailed, how much of a raise, what benefits came with it. I remember feeling suspicious at how interested she suddenly was in my work life. I brushed it off, until that Wednesday afternoon when her text came in like a match tossed into dry brush. Family meeting this Saturday at 5. Important. Dad and I are cooking. Please come. I remember staring at my phone for a long time. There had only been 2 family meetings in my entire life, one when Uncle Peter got divorced and another when Grandpa's will caused tension. Meetings weren't casual. They were serious. I thought someone was sick. I had no idea the illness was something else entirely, a slow rot, hiding in the foundation of our so-called family values. Saturday arrived cloaked in spring sunlight, as if nature was trying to distract me from the dread pooling in my stomach. I drove the familiar route to Lexington past our old elementary school, the faded baseball field where I'd sat on the sidelines while Amanda got all the cheers, and finally down the tree-lined street where our house stood unchanged, except somehow it felt smaller. Amanda's blue Volkswagen was already in the driveway, along with Uncle Peter's SUV. That last one made my stomach clench. Uncle Peter wasn't the just stopping by type. His presence meant something was brewing. The front door swung open before I could even knock. Diana. "You're here," my mother said too brightly. "Come in, everyone's in the living room." Inside the house was suspiciously upgraded. A new leather sectional replaced the old sofa, and a flat-screen television that easily cost $2,000 loomed over the fireplace like a shrine to indulgence. For people who had always cautioned me about budgeting and saving for retirement, this display felt out of character. Amanda sat on the couch, looking freshly blow-dried and overdressed for a family dinner. Uncle Peter hovered by the fireplace, sipping iced tea like a man who didn't want to be part of whatever this was. My father stood awkwardly beside the recliner, wringing his hands. "Hey, big sis," Amanda chirped, bouncing up to hug me. "That blouse, is it new? You always look so classy." I blinked. Amanda hadn't complimented me on anything since the 10th grade, and that had ended with her borrowing and ruining my favorite sweater. "Thanks," I said carefully. "It's been in my closet forever." Mom offered me iced tea, the kind with mint from the garden. Everything felt off. Too nice. Too orchestrated. "Is someone sick?" I asked. "Your message sounded urgent." "Oh, nothing like that," my mom replied quickly. "Let's just have dinner first." The pot roast was rich. The potatoes were buttery, and dessert was a homemade tiramisu. All my favorites. I should have known then. During dinner, Amanda kept asking questions about my job. "So a senior manager, huh? That comes with quite the bump, I bet." Like 6 figures before I could answer. Mom cut in. "Let's not talk business over food. Diana, more potatoes." The tension simmered just beneath the conversation. Glances were exchanged. Phrases like "the situation and we'll discuss it later" slipped out, then vanished like smoke. Finally, after dessert, my father cleared his throat and announced, "Let's move to the living room. We have family matters to discuss." My heart pounded. We arranged ourselves in a strange semicircle. Dad in his recliner. Mom and Amanda side by side on the new couch. Uncle Peter off to the side like Switzerland, and me alone in the armchair across from them. The physical divide wasn't subtle. It was them. And me. Diana Dad began polishing his glasses in a move I'd seen 100 times when he was nervous. "This concerns all of us. It's about Amanda." "Of course it is. She's had some financial setbacks," he said delicately. Amanda bowed her head like a character in a soap opera, then added, "It's really bad, D." I kept my voice even. How bad they listed it out like a court case. Credit card debt, $24,000. Business loan, $15,000. Personal loan, $18,000. Medical bills, back rent. Borrowed money from friends. Total $78,000. The number hit me like a punch to the chest. I couldn't even speak. She tried to make the boutique work, Mom added tearfully. The jewelry shop, but the market's brutal right now. I remembered that boutique and Instagram page mostly drop-shipped items with inspirational quotes in pink cursive. She'd given it up after 2 months. Amanda sniffled. I even rented an office in Cambridge. For professionalism. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. My first office had been a corner of my bedroom, and my business cards were printed at a Kinko's, using a Groupon. Dad's voice took on that serious lecture tone from my childhood. We've done what we can. We've helped her before. But our retirement funds aren't what they used to be." Mom added, "You're in such a good place now, Diana. This promotion is a blessing for the whole family." There it was. My breath caught. "So, what exactly are you asking?" Amanda looked up, hopeful. "We thought maybe you could help cover the debt, just until I'm back on my feet." "Pay it off," Dad corrected bluntly. "It would give Amanda a fresh start." I stared at him. "You're asking me to give her $78,000, Mom rushed in. "She'd pay you back. Eventually." I looked from face to face. Amanda looked guilty but not ashamed. My parents looked expectant. Uncle Peter still hadn't said a word, but then Dad added something that made the room tilt sideways. "We also want to discuss a monthly contribution to our retirement, maybe a $1,000 a month, just until our accounts stabilize." I froze. $100,000. That's what they were asking. Nearly my entire savings. Years of working weekends. Years of clipping coupons. Years of denying myself the luxury they now expected me to hand over on command. I barely managed a whisper. "You want me to pay Amanda's debt and support your retirement?" Amanda perked up. "It's not giving Dee. It's a loan. I'll totally pay you back. Eventually." My father nodded. "We raised you to be responsible. This is how you show it." Amanda was already smiling, acting as if it was done, as if my silence was agreement. Uncle Peter finally cleared his throat. "Maybe Diana needs some time to think." Mom cut him off sharply. "Peter, we've discussed this. Diana understands family responsibility." Something inside me snapped. This wasn't a conversation. This was a decision they had already made. I stood. "I need a moment." And without waiting for their response, I walked out of the room. My hands were trembling. My ears were ringing. I walked upstairs to what used to be my bedroom, now converted into an office, and sat on the edge of the futon. On the wall, a dusty honor roll certificate still hung. Beside it, a photo of my 16-year-old self, smiling beneath a mortarboard. I looked into her eyes and whispered the truth. "They never saw you, did they? Not really." I sat in the dim light of my childhood room, staring at the framed photo of my 16-year-old self. The girl in that picture, ambitious, disciplined, hopeful, had no idea that she would grow into a woman treated like an ATM for a family that celebrated her reliability, but never respected her boundaries. Around me, the remnants of my past whispered truths I had tried for years to ignore. The bulletin board still had faded postcards from my college days, one from Chicago, where I visited a roommate's family because mine couldn't afford the flight, even though they sent Amanda to Disney World that same spring. My old debate trophies collected dust on a shelf. I used to think they were symbols of my hard work. Now they felt more like proof of how much I had bent and contorted myself to earn approval that never came. And in the corner, a cracked photo frame, one of the last pictures of our whole family smiling. It sat on the desk like a relic, a symbol of a story I no longer believed. My hands trembled as I traced the edge of the futon. It had replaced my childhood bed years ago when Mom turned the room into a guest office. She didn't even ask if I wanted to keep anything. That moment replayed in my mind my father saying, "Diana will pay for everything." Not a request, a decision. I closed my eyes, and memory after memory surged back, each one like a puzzle piece finally clicking into place. Freshman year of college, I'd called home with strep throat. I asked if they could help with the $80 urgent care bill. Dad had said, "You need to learn how to solve problems on your own." 2 months later, they flew Amanda and her friends to Miami for a beach weekend. Junior year. Amanda failed 2 classes. My parents bought her a puppy to boost her morale. I had finished my semester with straight A's and was told, "Don't get cocky." 3 years ago, they asked me to loan $3,800 for a roof repair on their rental property. I wired it the same day. They never paid me back. When I finally brought it up a year later, Dad waved it off with, "That was your contribution to the family home." When Amanda wanted to go to Spain with her friends, she asked me for $3,000. I said no. An hour later, Mom called to tell me I was cold, that Amanda never asked for anything. I hadn't seen it then, not fully, but I saw it now. This wasn't just about one debt or one outrageous meeting. This was about decades of conditioning. I had been raised not to say no. I was the safety net, the one they could guilt, leverage, and drain because they knew I wouldn't walk away. Until now. I rose from the futon and caught my reflection in the mirror. Pale face, set jaw, eyes burning with clarity. I didn't look angry. I looked awake. For the first time, I saw myself not as their obedient daughter or Amanda's responsible sister, but as a woman standing at the edge of a decision that could change everything. If I said yes, if I gave in, I would be reinforcing the pattern. It wouldn't stop at $78,000. They'd be back. Amanda would default again. My parents would fall short on their finances again, and I would never escape. But if I said no, I didn't know what would happen. I imagined slammed doors, hurtful words being cut off. I imagined being painted as selfish, ungrateful, cold. But I also imagined something else. Silence, stillness, boundaries that held, a life that was finally mine. I opened the drawer beside the futon and found an old notebook. I used to scribble business plans and motivational quotes in it as a teen. One quote jumped off the page, scrawled in purple ink from a decade ago. Sometimes you have to break your own heart to heal your life. That teenager knew, even back then. I closed the notebook, stood tall, and walked to the door. My hand hesitated on the knob. Downstairs, I could hear the clinking of coffee cups, quiet voices, waiting. They weren't expecting resistance. They had already spent the money in their minds. Amanda had probably already told her creditors help was coming. They thought I'd fold like always. But I wasn't the same girl who begged for college application fees. I wasn't the one who accepted being last in line for affection, for praise, for fairness. I opened the door, and I walked downstairs, heart pounding, spine straight. It was time to break the pattern. The kitchen was staged like a reconciliation scene from a family drama. Mom had brewed her strongest coffee, the one she only brought out when she wanted to seem warm and maternal. Amanda sat at the table with her laptop open, casually sipping a mimosa from a wine glass, like this was brunch and not a debt crisis. Dad looked up from his tablet, feigning surprise like he hadn't orchestrated this ambush. I stepped in calm. Amanda offered a lazy smile. "Morning, Di. I was just going over a payment plan I found online. If we consolidate, we can probably reduce the $78K down to we," I asked. The word came out low, controlled, cold. Amanda faltered. "Well, yeah, I mean, you're the one with the means. You always say you want to help family." Mom jumped in. "You're being dramatic, Diana. You're her sister. You're not paying for a handbag. This is a rescue." Dad leaned back in his chair. "Amanda's young. She made mistakes. You've made mistakes. Remember when you don't," I said sharply. The room stilled. I came down here to say one thing. I continued. "I'm not paying Amanda's debt. I'm not contributing to your retirement, and I'm not going to be manipulated with guilt because I chose to build something you never understood." Mom blinked. "Excuse me." Amanda's voice rose. "So you'd rather see me in jail than give me money you don't even need? That's cruel. You're literally swimming in cash." I laughed. "Once, dry and short. You think money is the point. You think this is about dollars. This is about choice. About years of being expected to fix your problems because I don't scream, because I don't crash cars or fail classes or date scammers who get you into $78,000 of credit card fraud." Amanda turned red. I turned to Mom. "Do you remember my graduation day from Wharton? You left early to get to Amanda's cheer banquet." I stood alone in a cap and gown while other parents took pictures and cried. "Diana, that's not fair." "No, it is fair, because that's the moment I realized I didn't matter unless I was needed." Dad scoffed. "This again? You always bring up old things. You think you're some kind of victim I faced him? No. Victims don't have power. I do." I walked to the counter and placed a single white envelope on the table. Inside is a signed notice revoking your access to my joint investment account, the one I set up for family emergencies. It's closed. And this, I dropped a second envelope, is my lawyer's notice that I am removing my name as co-signer on your mortgage. You have 30 days to refinance or sell. That's what the contract allows. Mom stood. You're abandoning us after everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done? I asked, voice sharp. Raised me. Fed me. Isn't that the bare minimum you raised Amanda to believe she's royalty and me to believe I had to earn my spot at the table? Amanda was crying now, but I didn't feel bad. I had cried alone too many nights while wiring money they never thanked me for. I grabbed my coat from the hook. Dad shouted, "You're going to regret this, Diana. No family, no legacy, just cold numbers." I turned back one last time. I'll take cold truth over warm lies. And I walked out. The door clicked shut behind me. Outside, the air hit my face like freedom. For the first time, I had said no. Not with shame. Not with apology. With clarity. I didn't know what would come next, whether they'd smear my name to relatives or Amanda would spiral further. But I knew one thing: I wasn't their financial hostage anymore. 3 months passed. Silence. No calls, no emails, no happy birthday texts, not even spam from Dad's old insurance newsletter he used to forward with thoughts in the subject line. It was bliss. I didn't chase it. I didn't break, and I certainly didn't regret. Instead, I got promoted Senior Director of Brand Strategy. I moved into a new apartment, smaller, but entirely mine. No shared legacy, no emotional mortgage, just clean space and sunlight. Then came the gala. It was for a nonprofit I had quietly supported for years, the Wallace Fund, which provides educational microgrants to young women entrepreneurs. I never attached my name. I didn't need the credit. I did it because I knew what it felt like to build alone in silence. But this year, they insisted I attend, said they had a surprise. I wore black velvet and walked in with a fellow exec. The ballroom sparkled with quiet wealth, not flash, not noise, power and presence. I kept my hair simple, my heels sharp. Then the MC stepped up, and now she said, "We want to honor a donor who has given anonymously for 7 years, whose support has launched 68 businesses, funded 112 scholarships, and helped hundreds of girls believe they're not invisible. Tonight she steps into the light, Diana Carter." I froze. The room erupted in applause. I stood, slowly. People turned. Eyes widened. Amanda's old high school friend, now a local influencer, was there and gasped audibly. I walked up to the stage, and just as I reached the podium, a voice behind me called out, "Wait!" "You're the Diana Carter," I turned. It was a woman in her 50s, silver hair, tears in her eyes. "You funded my daughter's startup in Tulsa. We didn't know it was you. You saved us." I blinked, took the mic, and said calmly, "I just didn't want other young women to wait for permission." The room fell silent, then rose to their feet. That's when I saw them. In the back of the room, Mom and Dad. Amanda, too. They were standing near the bar, stunned. Amanda's champagne flute wobbled in her hand. They hadn't been invited. But Amanda must have heard through the grapevine and brought them, probably hoping to prove I was still bitter, still small, but I wasn't. They watched as the mayor handed me a citation, as the board chair called me a quiet titan, as Forbes approached for an interview. They saw who I really was, not the silent ATM, not the dutiful daughter, a builder, a benefactor, a force, and they couldn't look away. I didn't wave, I didn't gloat. I simply smiled, turned, and walked off the stage to a standing ovation. After the gala, the silence broke. Mom called first. "We were proud," she said, her voice cracking like a screen door in wind. "We didn't know." I listened. But I didn't comfort her. Dad emailed next. The subject line said simply, "You proved us wrong." He didn't say sorry, but I didn't need him to. Amanda sent a text 3 days later. "I cried watching your speech. I'm working on getting a job, a real one." It wasn't an apology, but it was a start. I didn't go running back. I didn't throw them lifelines. I stayed still and watched them reach. Months passed. Amanda did land a job. Mom started therapy. Dad tried in his own awkward way, sending me book recommendations and snippets of news articles about strong women in business. We weren't whole, but we weren't broken in the same way anymore. And me, I stopped measuring my worth by their validation. I invested in myself. I took piano lessons like I always wanted. I bought a small lake cabin where I escaped twice a month with no reception, no expectations, just peace. I even started mentoring girls through the Wallace Fund directly. Sat across from young women with trembling hands and big dreams and said the words I once needed to hear, "You don't have to be chosen to be valuable." One Sunday, I met the family for brunch. It was quiet, not forced. Amanda talked about a coding boot camp. Dad asked questions instead of giving lectures. Mom brought a framed photo of my first lemonade stand, said she kept it all these years. We're rebuilding, not because I caved, but because I walked away first, because I stopped letting love come with a price tag, because I finally believed that my silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy. My absence wasn't cruel, it was necessary. And my boundaries weren't betrayal, they were the beginning of respect. Final line to camera. So to anyone who's ever been told you'll pay for everything, ask yourself, what is it really costing me to stay? Then don't wait for permission. Walk out and build your own table.